This plant contains a toxin and I'm about to eat it. Now I've done that because it's delicious and safe to eat, but how is that possible if it contains a toxin? If there's one word that can make people run a mile from foraging and think, I think I'll stick to the supermarket, it's the word toxic. Now this video is not about arguing that toxicity shouldn't be worried about at all. There are some plants and mushrooms out there which are deadly toxic even in small amounts, and so you should always follow the golden rule of foraging, which is to never eat anything unless you're 100% sure it's safe to eat. Never munch on a hunch. If in doubt, leave it out. But one of the points I want to make is that toxicity is a spectrum. It's far more nuanced than just edible or toxic. Toxicity ranges from mildly toxic, and that can mean lots of things, but for example, it could mean it's toxic if eaten in huge quantities, but perfectly safe to consume in the quantities we would eat it in, like the plant I've just eaten, right through to deadly toxic in a small amount. Let's go to something we hear in science all the time. The dose makes the poison. This idea reminds us that even something as benign as water can kill you in excessive amounts. The same principle applies to many wild and shop-bought plants that we eat every day. For example, many shop-bought and wild plants contain oxalic acid, which is a toxin. It's the toxin that was in the plant that I've just eaten, and it's a toxin because in large quantities it can cause conditions such as kidney stones, and in even larger quantities could even be fatal. It's in certain wild plants such as common sorrel that I've just eaten, but it's also in things like spinach and rhubarb, which we eat without hesitation. The difference is we don't label spinach as toxic or dangerous because it's familiar, and because the dose matters, meaning that of course spinach in the quantities that we eat it in is not toxic, it's good for you. And that's because in small amounts oxalic acid is harmless, but in large amounts it's not. Remember, the dose makes the poison in some cases at least. Even sorrel, when eaten in the normal amounts that most of us would, is perfectly safe to eat and good for you. You would have to eat literally bucket loads of it on a regular basis for it to cause any issues. That said, if you do have kidney stones or gout or conditions like that, it is advisable not to eat common sorrel, just as you would also not want to eat many of the other foods in our normal diet like spinach and rhubarb. To help make one of the points that I'm trying to make in this video, I'm now going to turn my attention to supermarket foods and talk about them in the same language and using the same standards that I would if I was out here talking about wild food. Here we have potatoes. These are in the nightshade family, so the same family as deadly nightshade. Potatoes are edible and safe to eat though, but they must be cooked before consumption, as eating significant quantities raw can cause digestive upset. Green potatoes should also not be consumed, even cooked, because they are actively toxic, containing significant levels of the toxin solanine. Here we have peanuts. These are edible and safe to consume for the vast majority of people, but if you've never had them before, it's wise to try just a small amount first, because some people can suffer from a life-threateningly adverse reaction to them. These are cashew nuts. These are safe to consume, but only because they've already been processed. Cashew nuts straight from the tree before they are processed and brought to the supermarket are very toxic. These are kidney beans. Again, raw kidney beans are very toxic, but these have been processed to make them safe to eat. These drinks here are all toxic. They are generally safe to consume in very small quantities, but even in moderation they are thought to be bad for you, containing the toxin alcohol. There is some evidence that tiny quantities consumed on a regular basis, and I'm talking so small that most of us wouldn't even want to bother, is actually good for you, but beyond that the net effect is generally negative. Here we have coffee. This is mildly toxic, containing the plant toxin caffeine. Now, caffeine in large quantities, just like alcohol in large quantities, can be deadly toxic. In 2021, a personal trainer who miscalculated how much caffeine powder to take died from ingesting a high level of caffeine. But in the small quantities that you are likely to have it in the form of a couple of cups of coffee a day, it is generally safe to consume, with some evidence of low doses even being good for you. Here we have supermarket ready meals. Now, pretty much all of these, not all of them to be fair, but pretty much all of these contain all sorts of weird ingredients, and so the vast majority of these I would class as either inedible at best or mildly toxic. Occasional consumption is unlikely to cause any issues, but there is a lot of evidence suggesting that consistent and long-term consumption can lead to all kinds of serious chronic diseases. This is rhubarb, and here we have spinach. Both contain quite high levels of oxalic acid, a toxin that can cause kidney stones in large enough quantities. Now, realistically, these are safe to consume in the quantities that you would eat them in, but that said, if you already have kidney stones, it is wise to avoid foods like these with oxalic acid in them. Other foods that contain oxalic acid include coffee, chocolate, nuts, pulses, broccoli, and many other foods. Trust me, the list is long, but they're all perfectly safe to eat as long as you just eat them in normal quantities. I could go on, but hopefully you get the message, which is ultimately don't be put off wild food or learning about foraging because of toxicity. And also another point is that we tend to judge wild foods, I think, with a different set of standards than we do our regular cultivated shop-bought foods. In some circumstances, we dismiss many wild foods for their toxins while regularly consuming toxins, caffeine, oxalic acid, alcohol, preservatives, artificial colours and stabilisers. Many people consume them regularly because we understand the context and effects. So with the same level of knowledge and education of foraging and wild foods, you'd see that wild food often gets an unfairly bad rap. I mentioned things like cashew nuts and kidney beans being toxic in their raw state, and sometimes the same principle applies to certain wild foods. And just like cashew nuts and kidney beans, this shouldn't put you off eating them. The only difference, of course, is that with wild food, you're the one that has to do the processing to make them safe, such as leaching in water, as is the case with acorns to make them safe to eat, or cooking before eating, such as with certain mushrooms like the tawny grisette, which is toxic raw but safe to eat when cooked. Foraging doesn't mean fearing the toxins in wild food, it just means understanding them. Of course, to reiterate from earlier, there are some plants and mushrooms that are very simply deadly toxic in a way whereby you can't remove the toxicity from them, and eating even small amounts can be incredibly dangerous. But on the flip side, there are far more examples of toxicity in wild food which are more in line with kidney beans, coffee or spinach. As in, although they might technically contain toxins, they can either be processed out to make them safe to eat, or the toxicity is so low that they are still safe to eat and even good for you. So next time you hear the word toxic in relation to wild food, whether it's on a video or you read it in a book or you hear it on a foraging course, just take a step back and think about exactly what is meant and research and learn how toxic it is. From doing that, you might realise that in some cases, whatever you're looking at might actually be safe to eat in low doses. You might find that the toxins in there are not actually safe to eat at low doses, but that you can get rid of them through some method like cooking. Or you might find that actually, yeah, it's just toxic. This is going to make me ill or even kill me if I eat this no matter what I do. In which case, obviously, you leave it alone. But the point is, just think, don't just write everything off when you hear the word toxic.